We just can't live the way we're living right now. And there's no way to effectively reset civilization better than psychedelics.
You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. Do you know what I'm talking about? The Matrix. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window, or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
What if most of what you've been told in the media about psychedelics is wrong? Have we been misled about the medicinal properties of psychedelics, just like we were misled about medicinal marijuana? More than 40 years ago, governments worldwide made psychedelics illegal, calling them dangerous drugs. But the most dangerous drugs on Earth are alcohol and nicotine, and both are legal. The law is not based on science. For thousands of years, native cultures have used psychedelics not as drugs, but as medicines. And science is on their side. Numerous studies show that psychedelics are not neurotoxic. They're non-addictive, and they have the power to cure even the most stubborn cases of anxiety, depression, addiction, and post-traumatic stress disorder. When people with treatment-resistant PTSD were given the psychedelic MDMA combined with psychotherapy, 83% were cured. Compare that to just 25% with psychotherapy alone. With 22 veterans a day committing suicide in the US, it's vital this medicine is made available to the public. The caffeine in your coffee is more toxic on your body than psilocybin mushrooms. The science shows these non-addictive substances actually slow down activity in areas of the brain overactive in people with depression. In one study by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, 80% of subjects who were given psilocybin said the experience increased their sense of well-being and life satisfaction, and 30% called it the single most important experience of their lives. Psilocybin has cured anxiety, depression, cluster headaches, and smoking addictions. One study from the University of Southern Florida found psilocybin may even lead to neurogenesis, or the regrowth of brain cells. In the 1950s, doctors in Canada used LSD to cure alcoholism, with a 45% success rate. Even Bill Wilson, who founded Alcoholics Anonymous, used LSD to cure his debilitating depression. Wilson unsuccessfully tried to get LSD added to the 12-step program, saying its ability to spark introspection and spirituality was the essential first step. And a recent study shows LSD significantly reduced anxiety in people with terminal illness. A study finds long-term use of the psychoactive cactus peyote does not cause cognitive or psychological harm. Peyote use is legal in 6 states across the U.S., and Native Americans have consumed the plant for hundreds of years to connect with a deep sense of spirituality. DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, is a psychedelic compound produced profusely in nature and even inside the human brain. In one study, Dr. Rick Strassman proved DMT can be safely given to people. Those who participated in Strassman's study reported having intense spiritual experiences and communicating with a higher intelligence while on DMT. Ibogaine is derived from a West African shrub, and it's known for helping people kick stubborn heroin and prescription pill addictions without experiencing withdrawal. The science shows long-term drinkers of the Amazonian psychedelic brew ayahuasca have increased levels of serotonin. That's the brain chemical that regulates happiness, and ritual ayahuasca drinkers are less likely to have addictions. Western medicine tends to just treat symptoms, ignoring the root cause of many illnesses: trauma. We've all had trauma, and when we don't process it and purge it from our minds, trauma manifests itself in our bodies as unexplained pain, sickness, depression, anxiety, PTSD, cancer. The list goes on and on. When taken with the right mindset in a safe setting, psychedelics can heal trauma. When people consume these medicines, they enter a dreamlike state where a lifetime of traumatic memories are unlocked and processed, detaching the fear and emotion from the memories and creating new neural pathways. Some describe psychedelics as 30 years of therapy in one night. One of the greatest human rights tragedies of this century is that the general population does not have access to these medicines. Journalist Graham Hancock noted, quote, "At the deepest level, our consciousness is what we are. To the extent that if we are not sovereign over our own consciousness, then we cannot, in any meaningful sense, be sovereign over anything else either." Psychedelics are empowering. They put the power back into your hands and show you you can heal yourself from within.
Here are the facts. Dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, is a naturally occurring compound made of carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Think of it as a cousin to serotonin. DMT is present in plants and trace amounts exist in the human body. Scientists aren't sure what role DMT plays in humans, but plants containing DMT have been used in religious ceremonies for thousands of years. In the United States, DMT is a Schedule I drug, and its legal use is restricted to certain religious organizations, such as União de Vegetal. This substance is illegal under Section C, which means there is a lack of accepted safety for use of DMT under medical supervision. The substance is not addictive, yet thousands of people in the US and abroad have used it to experience what some describe as an extra-dimensional plane of reality, vastly different from our own, but just as real. Here's where it gets crazy. According to some researchers, these users may be at least partially correct. It seems that DMT users may have eerily similar hallucinations. In The Spirit Molecule, Dr. Rick Strassman, a professor of psychiatry at the University of New Mexico, notes that many of the 60 volunteers he exposed to DMT reported experiencing an interaction with some other intelligence, an alien presence that communicated with them during their hallucinations. According to Graham Hancock, author of Supernatural, these presences are real and are able to assist human beings. As evidence, Hancock points to the success of ayahuasca clinics, which expose drug addicts to the traditional ayahuasca rituals of the Amazon. After 5 sessions with the drug, Hancock claims more than half of the addicts in the clinic break their addiction completely. Hancock also believes that this drug use and contact with these creatures dates back tens of thousands of years, and that the cave paintings sketched in places like Chauvet, France, are evidence of interaction with these beings. It seems far-fetched. The idea that a psychoactive substance could trigger some sort of extrasensory contact with non-human intelligence is a lot to swallow, especially without proof. While conspiracy theorists and researchers like Hancock argue that the proof is all around the world in ancient religious symbols, the mainstream considers this wishful interpretation rather than objective fact. Professor Strassman is attempting to find the biological explanations for the effects of DMT, and he believes the answer may lie in the pineal gland. Strassman theorizes that the pineal gland may be the source of human DMT production. He also notes the great symbolic significance ancient religious art seems to place on the so-called third eye, which he interprets as the pineal gland. During his experiments, he noted that the common hallucinations of his patients paralleled near-death experiences. When he gave patients a high dose of DMT, the compound seemed to induce the mental state found in encounters with aliens and religious experiences. Strassman is continuing his research today, exploring the connection between these states of consciousness and the historical accounts of prophecy. Some conspiracy theorists believe that DMT is illegal precisely because these experiences are not mere hallucinations. What's more, some argue that governments expose citizens to fluoride to inhibit the function of the pineal gland, hoping to keep the revelatory nature of these experiences from the mainstream. Yet it's difficult to believe that a vast government conspiracy this strange could exist without solid proof. And the current scientific research seems to produce more questions. Why does DMT occur naturally in the human body? Why do high amounts of DMT cause users to experience such similar lucid hallucinations? Is DMT just a powerful hallucinogenic substance or something else? Something that ancient civilizations have used for centuries and modern science has only begun to rediscover.
36 people were on what many say was a life-changing trip, but none of them ever left a university laboratory. They volunteered to take the psychedelic ingredient that puts the so-called magic in certain kinds of mushrooms. And now there's a surprising follow-up. CNN's Carol Costello joins us live with the results. Carol, what's happening now?
Well, John, maybe the hippies of the 60s weren't just on something. Maybe they were onto something. Scientists at Johns Hopkins now say magic mushrooms really can expand your mind, producing a kind of religious experience. 14 months ago, they gave dozens of volunteers magic mushrooms, and today, those volunteers are still feeling the effects. The whole Johns Hopkins study seems just so hippy-dippy 60s. It brings to mind Timothy Leary, the man who first widely touted the alleged magic in this tiny mushroom.
5 years ago, by accident in Mexico, I took Mexican mushrooms.
Leary, a Harvard researcher, claimed his mushroom-induced psychotic trip was so spiritual it led him and a generation to
turn on, tune in, and drop out.
Yeah, until the federal government stepped in and made hallucinogenic drugs illegal. Fast forward to 2006 and this research room at Johns Hopkins. 36 volunteers took part in an initial study on whether psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, really does have a lasting spiritual effect on people. Dee Dee Osborne, a business consultant, volunteered to find out.
It's a beautiful feeling. I'd not felt anything like that before.
Osborne, lying on this couch, received one dose over an 8-hour period. She saw a kaleidoscope of colors. Then
there was a tearing open of my heart, and then the feeling that we were all one.
The effects of that single session are still with her 14 months later, and with other volunteers. The study says at 2 months, the volunteers rated the experience as having spiritual significance and sustained positive changes in behavior.
Most people had experiences that really looked quite indistinguishable from classically occurring mystical type experiences.
The study is nothing like those done in the 60s. They're far more controlled. The goal is to explore whether this drug could prove therapeutic to those terminally ill.
Volunteers who are under psychological distress secondary to a cancer diagnosis. And the thought here is that an experience of this type, primary mystical experience, might well alter the course and the perception that the individual has of their disease process and quality of life.
As for those volunteers who took that long, strange trip on Johns Hopkins couch, the study says most have no regrets and feel their world is a better place because of it. Now, please keep in mind magic mushrooms are illegal in the United States, and they can be dangerous if taken without strict supervision. All of the volunteers in the Hopkins study were psychologically prepped for 6 to 9 months. Johns Hopkins scientists say the magic mushrooms can also produce fear and intense anxiety in some people. John?
Fascinating study, Carol. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, where do we sign up? The gun lobby warns Barack Obama.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
What is the psychedelic experience? Aldous Huxley believed it was the fundamental craving of the human spirit, a desire to transcend the survival-biased filter of perception, just for a moment, and catch a glimpse of reality beyond the bars of our cognitive prison. The psychedelic experience does not require drugs. Religious history and spiritual tradition are built upon these sublime moments. Messiahs hear the voice of God after a 40-day fast. Holy men, having isolated themselves in a cave, suddenly emerge with visionary truth. But to indulge in a 40-day fast to reach this heightened state is like burning your house down to bake a loaf of bread. 1 hour in a saltwater isolation tank quiets the noise of sensation until awareness becomes the mirror that reveals you to yourself. A single session of holotropic breathing restricts our mental chatter long enough to plunge you into the zero state of visionary inspiration. Then there are the earth movers, the plant medicines at the core of many religious sacraments, which according to Graham Hancock were integral to inspiring the earliest known art in caves throughout Europe. These plants are technologies. In a recent placebo-controlled study, 18 healthy adults were given psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. 94% of those who received the drug said the experiment was one of their top 5 most positive experiences. 40% said it was the single most meaningful experience of their life. Ayahuasca, long called the master medicine by the healers of the rainforest, offers an experience with the most visually powerful and mysterious of all molecules endogenous to life, dimethyltryptamine. Iboga, the root of an African shrub, confronts you with the voice of your own inner truth for 24 waking hours, and is being used to treat heroin addiction with relapse rates reported at a shockingly low 7%. Why doesn't the world embrace these technologies? Terence McKenna has an answer. It takes courage to take psychedelics. Real courage. Your stomach clenches, your palms grow damp, because you know this is real. This is going to work. Not in 12 years, not in 20 years, but in an hour. What can the psychedelic experience be? The cloth that wipes clean our lens of perception. The compass that points true north to our life calling. The lantern in the catacombs of our subconscious. The sword stroke that unfetters the muse. The sunlight that dispels the shadows of our past. Or simply a respite of eternity from the fast-flowing river of time. I've been to the other side and stared unflinching into the eyes of my eternal soul, seeing a matrix of 1,000 possible destinies. I've witnessed the span of our current universe contained in an unceasing heartbeat, each world a single blood cell, and each contraction a new existence for life itself. I've learned of humility on the back of a dragon, felt the terminal extreme of heaven and hell in the marrow of my bones, died and been reborn anew. What will your psychedelic experience be?
what does it mean that a whole area of research is not investigated for 30 years?
There's a reducing valve that we normally have in order to function, and it restricts our sensory awareness, it restricts our perception, it restricts our emotions. Psychedelics tend to open the valve.
It's impossible to convey what that experience is like in words.
I simply experienced that I was more than Jim Fadiman, a larger vision.
Our culture is somewhat rare, actually, cross-culturally. Actually, some 90% of the world's cultures have access to and use altered states of consciousness, and often use psychedelics for that purpose.
So you approach them honorably and respectfully. You never approach them for avoidance or recreationally.
The classic hallucinogens are LSD, psilocybin, DMT, and mescaline. We know from the 1960s that millions of kids took these compounds.
There was a media sensationalism which emphasized the tragic effects and gave almost no attention to the clinical uses and the therapeutic power of these substances.
You have to really re-educate people to understand that a lot of the hype that they heard from the media was hype. It was blown up out of proportion.
So it's only recently that our laboratory and other laboratories have been able to seek and get approval to reinitiate this research, and it's very exciting.
One of our participants was a woman in her middle 50s, and she didn't know how long she had to live. 4 hours in to the session, I asked her, how are you doing? And she said, it feels like healing.
If people have chronic anxiety about something or depression, it may be that we'll find treatments so that people don't have to be on antidepressants for years and years and years. Maybe there will be a single or 2 or 3 treatments that we can give with a psychedelic that will take care of that.
This research has the potential to open us to new understandings about the mind, about spirituality, about religion, about human potentials and capacities.
Altered states of consciousness is one of the things that we're given access to by being human. And the cultures that have discovered various ways of doing it have made that an important part of their culture.
It really does release the barriers to love and release the barriers to actualizing potential.
When it comes to mind-altering drugs, certain images might come to mind. A kaleidoscope of colors, the swinging 60s, counterculture. But recently, substances like LSD have made a long, strange trip themselves, right to the forefront of medical research. Doctors now think hallucinogens could help those with terminal diseases. Sounds revolutionary, but as you're about to see, psychedelic drugs have actually gone back to their roots. Here's our colleague from Radio Canada, Frederick Zalak.
Pamela Sakuda is 59. She lives near Los Angeles with her husband, Norbert. Last year, she received some terrible news.
I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic terminal colorectal cancer. And at the time, we didn't know when or how the disease would progress.
We had gone from being extremely satisfied with our everyday existence to being devastated. I can't, even now, I can't really conceive of a life without her.
You worry about what is coming down the road to you, to your family, to all the plans that you had made. The most immediate effect is you don't know what plans you can make anymore.
In facing her terminal cancer, Sakuda became understandably anxious. She sought help from psychiatrist Charles Grobe of UCLA. He offered her psilocybin, a hallucinogenic drug found in magic mushrooms, but not for a short-term high. He thinks a single dose can change how she deals with stress in the long term.
We're not treating the cancer per se, we're treating the secondary anxiety and the depression and the demoralization. If you look at the research data from the 60s, we'll find that there were a number of investigations of utilizing psychedelics with end-stage cancer patients with very impressive outcomes.
Research on psychedelic therapies started in the 1940s, soon after Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann made a stunning discovery. Hofmann synthesized lysergic acid, creating LSD. In April 1943, he consumed a small dose to assess its properties. Going home on his bicycle, Hofmann saw his surroundings bend out of shape. He thought he had lost his mind. Hofmann not only discovered LSD, he opened the door to an unexpected form of therapy.
Hofmann felt these compounds held tremendous potential value to alleviate suffering, that they could be very, very effective tools in the hands of physicians in medicine and psychiatry.
In the 50s and 60s, hundreds of peer-reviewed studies were published. Some scientists thought psychedelic drugs might be useful in treating alcoholism and drug addiction.
There is a group of powerful new chemicals which affect man's mind like nothing man has ever known.
Scientists in Saskatchewan and British Columbia were at the forefront of worldwide research on LSD. Over 1,000 patients went to the Hollywood Hospital in a Vancouver suburb, including singer Andy Williams, actor Cary Grant, and Robert Kennedy's wife. For many, a single LSD dose changed the way they saw themselves and helped them stop their addiction. The treatments were supervised by the late Dr. Ross McLean and his assistant, Frank Ogden, now 85.
It was their perception of themselves, and it was very noticeable when you gave them the mirror, because they saw themselves as others saw them. Lots of times when they held that mirror in front of their face, they would see themselves laying in a gutter.
It amplifies sensory experience. It provides an enhanced capacity to appreciate aesthetics of nature. It might allow one to venture deeply into their own unconscious mind and explore their autobiographic history and perhaps come up with some insights.
Roughly, round figures, 1/3 of the alcoholics that we treated just once never had another drink in their life, with 5- and 10-year follow-ups.
One LSD dose was thought to be more effective than years of psychotherapy, encouraging results in a field where conventional medicine couldn't offer much. But psychedelic treatments were also highly controversial. Dr. Ewan Cameron from the Allen Memorial Hospital in Montreal conducted research for the CIA in the 1950s. His patients were submitted to horrible brainwashing experiments with electroshocks and LSD.
Clearly, it damaged individuals who were treated, and I think in many respects it soured governmental authorities on supporting, funding, and even approving projects in the future.
The LSD craze escaped the labs and entered university campuses across the West. Authorities clamped down by banning hallucinogenic drugs and the research that went along with them.
An unfortunate casualty was that psychiatric and medical investigators who were really pursuing development of valuable new treatment models were forced to stop their work.
After a 30-year freeze, Dr. Grob felt it was time to reinvestigate these drugs. He headed to the Amazon, where certain psychedelic drugs were never banned. He studied ayahuasca, a hallucinogenic tea used by South American indigenous people. Grob followed 30 individuals suffering from various addictions. Half of them were given ayahuasca.
Many of these individuals had problems with chronic alcoholism, drug addiction, antisocial behaviors, and after their exposure to ayahuasca and their very profound experiences, the individuals I interviewed had had transformative life experience and became highly functional. Their alcoholism, drug addiction, sociopathy appeared to entirely remit.
When analyzing blood samples, Grob made an astonishing discovery. Ayahuasca seemed to give users a higher number of serotonin receptors. Serotonin is a mood-regulating chemical produced by the body. With these results in mind, Grob headed back to the US, determined to conduct controlled studies. It took years to convince authorities, but Grob finally got approval to use psilocybin to treat anxiety in terminally ill patients. Sakuda was the ideal candidate for this experiment. During one session, she took a placebo. During the other session, she took psilocybin.
You first start to notice a little physical difference. You start to feel a little tingling physically, a little different. And then you start to feel maybe emotionally a little different.
She did great. She did wonderful. At about the 4-hour point, her tears, I witnessed tears flowing down her face, and so I really didn't know what was going on. So I asked her when it was time to check in what was going through her mind, and she said she was thinking about her husband and how difficult it would be for him when she died.
I could feel myself crying, and the tears were flowing. I had the eye mask on, but it wasn't from sadness or grief. It was a release of energy, of emotion, and a feeling that I began to see other more positive ways of looking at my situation, at my present life. I'm so worried about what's going to happen in 6 months that I'm making myself miserable now. What a waste. I mean, I'm letting fear of the future mess up the present. And that was a real epiphany. It was like, oh, okay, I could change that.
After the 6-hour treatment, her husband noticed a remarkable change.
She was not in distress to the degree that she had been prior to receiving the medicine. And this didn't just last for a day, it just didn't last for a week. It's been ongoing. It's been continual. She just is a different person than she was prior to the treatment.
Psychedelic drugs are still controversial, but they are regaining interest in the research community. Last January in Basel, Switzerland, 2,000 people gathered for the 100th birthday of Albert Hofmann, the inventor of LSD. Hofmann still believes his discovery will be useful for medicine.
My name is Charlie Grob.
Grob discussed some of his early results. Other scientists attended, including a team from Harvard studying peyote, psilocybin, and MDMA, better known as ecstasy. They are assessing their effects on depression, post-traumatic stress, and cluster headaches.
This field desperately needs more research. It's time we get back to it, because we may very well have at our disposal, highly efficacious treatment models, even for individuals who do not respond well to mainstream treatment.
A year after her treatment, Sakuda received more bad news. Her cancer has spread, and doctors are giving her 6 months to live. But she says the one dose of psilocybin had a lasting effect on her outlook.
For a long time, I think I've been able to maintain that view. We've done a lot of things in that time. We've traveled, we've done a lot of things socially, we've attended a lot of things. We've just lived a very full and rich life.
If large-scale studies confirm these results, the psychedelic drugs that wooed a generation might make a comeback, but this time in the doctor's office. Frédéric Zalac, CBC News, Vancouver.
One final note on our story. Pamela Sakuda died in November. She was 59.
What seems to happen in the psychedelic state is that when something is positive, it has the potential to be incredibly positive, to the extent of being euphoric and ecstatic. But similarly, if something is negative, it has the potential to be quite hellish and dysphoric and frightening. Psilocybin is found in magic mushrooms, and it's a compound that is broken down in the body into another compound which is very, very similar to a naturally occurring neurotransmitter in the brain or chemical messenger in the brain, and that's called serotonin. Now, their pharmacology is subtly different, but what's so interesting about this drug is that that subtle difference in its pharmacology confers profound effects on consciousness.
Our first study was published in 2006 in healthy volunteers who received psilocybin or a comparator drug. This was all in a blinded fashion under optimally supported conditions in which they lay down on a couch, had eye shades on, headphones through which they listened to a program of recorded music. They were in the presence of two people with whom they had already developed a trusting relationship. Under those conditions, a high percentage of people end up reporting a constellation of experiences, the most interesting piece of which is that it really falls into a category of something the psychology of religion people talk about as a primary mystical experience.
Analogy that you could use to describe how the drug affects brain activity is either to say that brain activity becomes relatively disordered or disorganized in the state. Another thing that you could say is that it's not entire disorder, that rather it's more like the brain enters a more kind of anarchic state.
It's fascinating. I think one of the interesting implications of this kind of work is that we're biologically hardwired for having these kinds of experiences. It's not just unique to mystics, you know, spending years of meditation in a cave, that this is part of the human biology to have these kind of integrative experiences that can really set the stage and the platform for remarkable personal change.
And our research has really been looking at how it works in the brain. So we've used a number of different brain imaging modalities or brain scanning modalities. One of them's functional magnetic resonance imaging, which uses high field magnets to look at changes in brain blood flow. The brain imaging work that we've done, one of the interesting findings was that there was a really quite marked decrease in brain activity in a particular region of the brain which is overactive in depression. So this region of the prefrontal cortex is typically highly active in depression, and a range of effective treatments for depression all normalize this overactivity in this region of the prefrontal cortex. And psilocybin did exactly that, and it did it very rapidly.
We're running 2 different trials now at Johns Hopkins. One is in cancer patients who are anxious or depressed secondary to their cancer diagnosis, generally a life-threatening cancer diagnosis. Although we haven't touched their disease process, they still experience the pain. They're still dealing with the fact that they're going to leave their loved ones or their children. In some cases, these are parents of kids who are young. That sadness is still there, but there's also a larger framing of that, and so it's very touching.
There's a growing consensus among scientists that drug laws and prohibition around psychedelic drugs is irrational, it's unhelpful, and potentially it's precluding people who are unwell getting effective treatments, and that's a shame.
These are remarkable compounds with, I think, remarkable implications if we can understand how they work and why they work.
Saying that. I'm just saying we live in this ridiculous state of hypocrisy because there's certain drugs that we make illegal. You literally aren't supposed to have them. It's not that you can get them prescribed if you need them or they can, monitor you. No, you're not allowed to. Big Daddy, who knows more than you, tells you that if you're with this drug, we're going to lock you in a cage. Like, what the fuck? Why is that? Is that set up so that the people who really appreciate and recognize the merits in the psychedelic drugs rise up so that they realize they have to literally overthrow the culture, the way of thinking? They have to not overthrow, rather, but overturn the way the culture accepts drugs? Because that's the only thing that seems to make sense. All the beneficial ones are illegal. You don't ever hear about someone talking to you about they did Valium and they just really had this life-changing experience and learned to love everyone. No, you don't have that fucking on Valium. I felt connected to the universe, and I realized that I'm just a part of a never-ending process, and my biology is trying to hold on to everything, and that's where the insecurity comes from. No, you don't get that from fucking Valium, okay? You get that from mushrooms. And mushrooms grow outside, and if they catch you with them, they put you in a cage. If they come by your fucking house and you have mushrooms growing under your tree in your backyard, they are legally allowed to lock you in a box. They can take you and arrest you.
Yeah.
That's fucking bananas. Bananas. And that our enforcing our ridiculous thinking on the Mexican people is why those drug cartels got into power. Is that a conspiracy theory? Perhaps. Is that a little bit of tinfoil hat? Perhaps. Yeah, maybe. But, some of that tinfoil hat shit is on the money. And I think it is with this. We live right next to a country that's involved in a way more deadly war than the one going on in Afghanistan or going on in Iraq.
Yep.
Both of them combined can't even touch the body counts that are happening in Mexico right next door. They're killing motherfuckers. They're going crazy over there, dude. And you can get there by walking. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're all invested in Afghanistan and securing Afghanistan. Meanwhile, we live right next to a fucking third world country. We are connected to them with an invisible line, and they're involved in the bloodiest pharmaceutical war that's ever been fought in the history of this earth, the illegal pharmaceutical war. They're fighting it with goddamn tanks. They're fighting a pharmaceutical war with tanks. And that's what the war is. The war is who gets to sell your shit. Is it going to be people that have no law whatsoever, or is it going to be people that have laws?
Yeah.
And if you say it's going to be people that have laws and that the other stuff you're not going to allow, well, then someone's going to sell that other stuff because there's a goddamn demand for it. No?
Shit's dangerous everywhere. Like, did you hear about this West Hollywood yesterday or something like that? A woman walks into a Target at West Hollywood and just starts fucking stabbing or shooting people.
God.
I think shooting people. Shot 4 people. And finally was taken down by...
You can't say, I think. You got to do a Google on that,
I'll
motherfucker. This is the age of the internet, son. You can't be using 1984 type storytelling skills.
This is a glass of water, colorless, tasteless. It contains 100 gamma of LSD-25. 1/10 of a milligram, the equivalent of 1/600th of a grain. An ounce of this material will make 150,000 such doses. Let us observe the effect some 3 hours later. Well, tell me.
Well, I just couldn't. I couldn't possibly tell you. It's here. Can't you feel it? This whole room. This everything is in color, and I can feel the air. I can see it. I can see all the molecules. I'm part of it. Can't you see it?
I'm trying.
Oh, it's just like you're released, or you're free, or I don't know how I can tell you. I wish I could talk in Technicolor, or let you see. Did you say you can see it?
No, I can't quite see it. Tell me about it.
I can't tell you about it. If you can't see it, then you'll just never know it. I feel sorry for you.
It's almost impossible, of course, as all the patients say, to describe it. You can only say it isn't, it isn't, it isn't. Trying to tell people what it is.
How do you mean that?
Well, I mean that there are the colors and the beauties, the designs, the beautiful way things appear. People themselves, dull people that I thought dull, appear fascinating, interesting, mysterious, wonderful. But that's only the beginning. A man was saying it this afternoon who was taking it. Suddenly you notice that there aren't these separations, that we're not on a separate island shouting across to somebody else and trying to hear what they're saying and misunderstanding. You know, you use the word yourself, empathy. This thing's flowing underneath. We're parts of a single continent. It meets underneath the water. And with that goes such delight, the sober certainty of waking bliss.
One of the questions was, could psychedelics be used for non-mystical problem solving, for scientific, hard-nosed, data-rich stuff? And the answer that we had at the time was nobody had any idea.
Well, gentlemen, here's mud in your eyes. Cheers.
So we took senior scientists and said to them, we will give you a psychedelic session, and the price of admission is a problem that you have been working on for at least 3 months and are frustrated about, and that matters to you a lot.
Their problems ranged from abstract scientific equations to practical architecture and furniture designs.
We gave them a psychedelic, we gave them some hours to just relax and be with themselves, and then we got them up and said, it's time to work on your problems, and they dove in.
I took a trip through architectural history and visited and saw various cities and places.
Each subject claimed that with focus and guidance, LSD allowed them to approach their problem with a fresh perspective, or instilled them with the freedom to explore ideas more openly. The result?
Patents issued, products built, theories extended and improved, papers published, and more importantly, for many weeks thereafter, according to the scientists, their overall level of creativity was up.
Dr. Carey Mullis, I now ask you to receive the Nobel Prize from the hands of His Majesty the King.
Biogeneticist Dr. Carey Mullis had won the Nobel Prize for inventing PCR, a revolutionary technique for multiplying tiny amounts of DNA for use in genetic research. A creative breakthrough he claims came from psychedelic drug use.
I don't do experiments often, in big things like, what would if I had not taken LSD ever? Would I have still invented PCR? I don't know. I doubt it. I seriously doubt it.
It's not that psychedelics manufacture wonderment or that they can automatically make us more imaginative beings, but what psychedelics do is pull us so radically out of our comfort zones. They decondition our thinking. They thrust us out of everything we thought we knew about the world in order to see things as if for the first time and form new synaptic connections. You know, they change our context. That's why people take psychedelics and they say, take a trip. Right? Take a trip. Well, look at the physical equivalent of that. Taking a trip means physically go somewhere you've never been before where no one knows your name, see the world differently, and jump into a new culture. Like, I think it has to do with forcing yourself to gain different perspectives on how you see reality. You know, reality is made of language, and so how you map your reality really matters. The words you use to map your reality. And so I think that what psychedelics do is, I think they're tools. I think they're tools. That's what I think, which is very different from just fully advocating their use. I think that they're tools that need to be treated with respect.
In 1965, the U.S. government began shutting down scientific studies across the country. Fadiman's was one of them.
The middle of our 7th session, around really literally noon, a certified letter arrived from the federal government. We opened it, and it said, as of the moment of reading this letter, your research is terminated. The research is over. And I held this letter, and I looked around the room, knowing that in the other room we had 4 scientists in the midst of a psychedelic session with major problems on their minds. And I said to the group, I think we got this letter tomorrow.
Within 5 years, the U.S. government classified it as a Schedule I drug, declaring it had no medical value.
Research hit a brick wall and stopped. And so that was the last research for about 40 years.
As many of you know, I am a great fan and spokesman for psilocybin, for the mushrooms. The mushrooms that I am so stoked on were discovered in 1953 by Gordon and Valentina Wasson in Huautla. Discovered in 53, made absolutely Schedule I illegal in 1966. 13 years was the window in which Western civilization had to study this compound and figure out what it was for. And they were just beginning to focus upon it when it was made illegal. LSD, discovered in 37, not brought into the scientific literature until 48, not generally available even in the laboratory until 1950, made totally illegal in 1966. 16-year window. Think about the fact that when LSD was legal, psychiatrists, professional researchers were consistently reporting cures of chronic alcoholism with 1 500 gamma dose. 1 dose. Cure, like a 50% cure rate without recidivism for chronic alcoholism. Spectacular findings were being reported. When LSD swept through the scientific community, it for pharmacologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, it had the same kind of excitement and feeling of breakthrough that the splitting of the atom had for the physics community in the late 30s.
What is DMT? If your research is strong enough, you'll often find yourselves hovering over this kind of question. What is DMT, and why is it such a topic in the first place? I'm not sure how you found yourself coming to this video. However you did, know, strangely, it's not by chance. In fact, none of this is. For me, DMT was exactly that. It sort of just found its way into my experience from nowhere. Whether or not you'll hear about DMT again doesn't make a difference. Why? Because no matter who you are, no matter where you live or what your background is, or where you come from, everybody, that includes you, within your lifetime, will undergo this most profound, earth-shattering, mind-blowing, overwhelming experience you couldn't possibly imagine with your most wildest imaginings. First, I will need to take you through the basics of DMT. Eventually, throughout this video, I will get into more deeper and more interesting ways of looking at DMT. On the surface, DMT is just a chemical. Its scientific name is dimethyltryptamine. This chemical compound has been found in many various species of plants, mammals, and amphibians. DMT is also found within the human body. The place where DMT is made and released within our body is in the middle of our head. Sitting in the middle of our head, in absolute geometric center, between the two hemispheres, is a gland called the pineal gland. Pineal gland because it resembles the shape of a pine cone and has the unmistakable attributes of phi ratio, a ratio that exists everywhere in the universe, nature, and the human body. This gland is what makes and produces dimethyltryptamine and melatonin. Melatonin helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle and is known as the hormone of darkness. If melatonin is known as a hormone of darkness, then DMT is a cascade of blazing light. The pineal gland has been given a name to many as the third eye. If you've ever seen images like these before, it should begin to make sense why there is a spot in the middle of their foreheads. In my eyes, it is interesting when you take a look at the location of the pineal gland within the human brain. If we begin to trace our nerve endings back to a central source within our body, much like following the flow from a leaf back to its branch, we eventually reach a starting point, a seed, the place where all the wires begin to come out. René Descartes and many others believed the pineal gland to be the seat of the soul, where the immaterial soul interacts and communicates with the material body. It is spoken as of a doorway that leads within to inner realms of spaces of higher awareness, understanding, and consciousness. According to research, there are 3 moments in life where DMT is secreted in massive amounts from the pineal gland. The first moment occurred a very long time ago when you were first born. The next time this occurs is during heavy REM sleep. DMT, in my opinion, is the chemical that causes an inner light to be lit up inside you, causing you to dream at night. You could think of the process as a lit light bulb behind the film strip, and the projector, the screen, is your mind, not subjugated by time, space, or dimension. The third time DMT is secreted in massive amounts is upon your very own death. For some strange reason, when you die, DMT floods your bloodstream. This also happens to people who go through near-death experiences. So we have 3 anomalous moments where DMT is released in immense quantities from our pineal gland. When we enter this world, when we dream in this world, and when we finally exit this world. Many Buddhists believe that after a person dies, the soul is not immediately reborn. Instead, it travels to the bardo, which is a transitional place for souls in between life and death. From there, the soul enters a 49-day journey towards rebirth before incarnating itself back into a body. Now here is the interesting part. The pineal gland appears in the human fetus at day 49 after its conception. And also the gender of the baby is also decided on day 49. This sort of stuff boggles my mind. While we are at it, I would like to point out one more thing that may interest you. Exactly 49 days after Easter, Christians celebrate a holiday called Pentecost. Pentecost is the day, according to Christians, when the elders in the temple were surprised by a gusting wind, when suddenly tongues of fire came down and rested upon their heads. Could they be talking about the inner workings of our brain and the fire being light produced by our pineal gland? If you believe that statement is way too far-fetched, I highly suggest you take a look at the incredible research of Bill Donahue. In my view, the Bible is a document about the human mind. The places it mentions are not physical places on the ground, but places inside of your head. With that being said, there are 2 other ways I'm aware of that you can produce DMT inside of your body. The first is you make it, consciously, through deep meditation. The second option is to ingest it, either orally or by inhaling it so that it reaches your bloodstream. This is where the subject matter takes a wild turn for some, as they see this as a possibility of experiencing DMT while still being fully conscious and awake. You may not realize it, but when you ingest food or water, for example, you are at the basis of it all, literally putting codes into your body. Some codes help strengthen the immune system. Some codes allow for the regeneration of stronger bones and healthy brain tissue. There are some codes that completely destroy the integrity of your entire system, such as drinking too much alcohol. Regardless of what substances are being used, they are all codes, or another word we'll use for them are scripts. When you go to a doctor, oftentimes he or she will hand you a script to take home for you to use. These scripts may help clear the system from a foreign virus. Some scripts handed to you by your doctor may not be compatible with your body because of all the errors that occur. We often call these errors side effects. Your body is trying to eliminate these codes because most of them, especially from the pharmaceutical industry, are not natural ingredients and do not blend well with the interface of a human body. Pharmaceutical drugs such as Oxycontin, Prozac, and Lipitor, food additives like BHT, aspartame, MSG, and Red 40, for example, are all bad coding and come with tons of script errors that will cause your system to crash, and crash hard. You go to another medical professional, one who operates their practice in the tropical rainforests of Peru, then shaman or shamaness will give you a script that will be more benign and more beneficial to your body than the ones handed to you at your local pharmacy. Shamans will often prepare the patient a sacred plant medicine known as ayahuasca. The main active ingredient in ayahuasca is dimethyltryptamine. Dimethyltryptamine usually comes from the leaves of a perennial shrub called Psychotria viridis. And it's interesting, as the word viridis resembles the word veritas, veritas meaning truth. Once ingesting ayahuasca, one undergoes a life-changing healing journey on many levels. The patient is temporarily reconnected, usually about 4 to 6 hours, back into the spirit world for guidance and information. There has been scientifically documented reports of people being cured of depression, addiction to hard drugs, alcoholism, post-traumatic stress disorders, anxiety disorders, traumas from the past, and so on. There are many videos online today of people who have uploaded their direct experiences with ayahuasca. Other codes that are beneficial to the human body are delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, 3,4,5-trimethoxyphenethylamine, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, and ibogaine, which please make note here, ibogaine unquestionably cures the addictions to heroin. The final way to experience DMT is through the inhalation of this substance by extracting DMT through various DMT-containing plants. Once extracted, you are left with crystals which you vaporize and smoke. Nothing could possibly prepare you for this experience. You can do 100 Google searches and nothing will come close to what you imagine. The experience of smoking it lasts 5 to 15 minutes and is safe. There are no side effects other than jaw-dropping, utterly astonished amazement, which is a bit intimidating at first due to the sheer beauty of it all. The most compelling part of this experience is that wherever your consciousness goes to, that dimension is teeming with life and endless beauty. Surely, someone has been keeping this a secret from humanity. You may be thinking, okay, great, sign me up. Where can I get this stuff at? It is 100% illegal to have in your possession or use in the US. You will have to check in with your own country's laws about the permitted use of DMT. I want to say a few more things about DMT and the pineal gland. There is a substance other than food and diet which damages the pineal gland, and that is fluoride. In the 1990s, a British scientist named Jennifer Luke discovered that fluoride accumulates to strikingly high levels in the pineal gland. Based on this and other evidence, the National Research Council has stated that fluoride is likely to cause decreased melatonin production and to have other effects on normal pineal functions. In an odd set of circumstances relative to what we have discovered, there are many countries, including the United States, that have been fluoridating the public's drinking water supply since the 1940s. So then, clearly at a very young age of a baby's life, if the parents are not aware of fluoridation in their water, the baby will immediately begin the calcification process. The remedy, then, is to decalcify the pineal gland. How? Well, there are several methods, one of which is to take key supplements. These are just a few, but some of the more popular ones. Fermented skatefish liver oil, cod and ratfish liver oil, blue-green algae, iodine, and activator X, which is vitamin K and K1. And when mixed with vitamin A and D3, activator X becomes a super potent detoxifier. The other way to decalcify the pineal gland is an ancient method long forgotten by today's 9-to-5 working society, and that is sun gazing. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. Won't you damage your eyes if you look at the sun? You'd be right if it's done during peak sun times. The only time to look at the sun safely is during sunrise and sunset. How many times have you ever watched the sunset in your life? Mainstream media will completely denounce sun gazing as being remotely safe. You don't want to be caught up in their fear. There are times when it's best to sun gaze safely without hurting your eyes. I personally have done sun gazing and always feel amazing afterwards. If you are considering doing sun gazing, please do your research. In conclusion, I still have questions going on in my mind to what DMT is really all about. Questions like, is DMT an intertransdimensional neurological transport network for consciousness? And is the pineal gland the window that allows consciousness to experience itself through it? It's almost as like the pineal gland, under a certain set of conditions, creates DMT as a key to unlock itself, allowing base consciousness to stream through it, leading into much higher levels of experience outside space or time. And isn't it funny when DMT comes into our lives? When we dream, when we are born, and when we pass away. Don't you think those are very peculiar times for this to be happening? Perhaps DMT is related to our breath. Don't you have to enter a certain state of breath and certain brainwave pattern for all these events to occur? Did other ancient civilizations know anything about the pineal gland? I hope this video inspires you to ask more questions about DMT and the pineal gland. I have uploaded my personal DMT experience to share with others if you're interested in hearing it. I will say, it's quite a journey once you step into the subject, as is certainly one of the miracles of life itself.
We've let the drug war demonize recreational use. Sounds frivolous and dangerous and reckless and irresponsible, but it's really not. And I think the rave movement is sort of a antidote to the fact that for many people the religious rituals that they have just don't work, and so we've had to create our own. In '82, I came out to study with Stan Groff and Christina Groff at Esalen, and somebody came to the month-long workshop with MDMA. And at first I was unimpressed the way they described it, because I thought it's not the bells and whistles and the whole lightning and all this from LSD or anything. It was just quietly helps you to talk to each other and feel your emotions. And I was like, I feel fine already. What do I need it for? But I thought, I should buy some anyway and give it a try. So I tried MDMA with my girlfriend, and it was just a revelation about how profound it is. And at the same time, I realized that it was starting to be sold as ecstasy. So and it was also the rise of the Nancy Reagan Just Say No. So I knew that it was inevitably going to be crushed.
But there were quite a number of psychologists, psychiatrists, other therapists using it kind of as a catalyst for therapy in the late 70s and early 80s. It was not an approved drug, but it wasn't illegal either.
So in '84, I started a nonprofit before MAPS that was the whole community together, the therapists and the researchers, and so we had a chance where it was legal to try to build a base of support and witnesses for a potential legal case. And that's where I contacted Robert Mueller at the United Nations, the Assistant Secretary General, and he helped me to meet a lot of religious professionals who I sent MDMA to, and they tried it in monasteries and all these places. And so we ended up, in 1984, the DEA moved to criminalize MDMA. And so I went to Washington and filed for an administrative law judge hearing, which to our utter astonishment we won. And the judge said that MDMA should stay in Schedule 3. It should be illegal for non-medical use, but therapists and psychiatrists should be able to have it available to their patients.
But then the DEA administrator overruled that and put it in Schedule 1.
So that's where I started MAPS in '86. And the idea was that there is no way but through the FDA, that the drug war is too powerful, but maybe through science and medicine we can make some progress. Right now there's 4 main streams of psychedelic research going on. One is MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think that will be the first through the system. MDMA is more gentle, people don't have panic reactions so much.
Our first study that we completed and published was with mostly people with childhood sexual abuse or rape. They all had to have had therapy and medications before and not been helped adequately. Among the people that got the MDMA with therapy, basically 83% had a good clinical response versus 25% with the therapy only.
By the end of 2021, we're hoping that MDMA would be a prescription medicine. The other stream is psychedelics for end of life. People tend to be more scared of dying than they are of drugs. So if we can show that with drug-assisted psychotherapy we can help the dying process, people are willing to listen, and I think that's really important.
We haven't touched their disease process. They still experience the pain. They're still dealing with the fact that they're going to leave their loved ones or their children. In some cases, these are parents of kids who are young. That sadness is still there, but there's also a larger framing of that, and so it's very touching.
And then the third strand is psychedelics for the treatment of addiction.
We decided to tackle cigarette smoking addiction. We've treated 13 people to date, most of whom are completely abstinent from smoking after their first psilocybin session.
And then the fourth strand of research is psychedelic neuroscience, to really understand consciousness and understand how the brain functions.
An analogy that you could use to describe how the drug affects brain activity is either to say that brain activity becomes relatively disordered or disorganized in the state. Another thing that you could say is that it's not entire disorder, that rather it's more like the brain enters a more kind of anarchic state.
And perhaps the most interesting finding is that the frontal cortex, that's perhaps the command and control center of the brain, diminishes its activity, and other brain areas take control. And this is the way how stored information that's not usually available to consciousness starts reaching consciousness.
MDMA is terrific for couples therapy, for just relationships. Now, having a difficult relationship is not a disease. That's why we have to focus on diseases for political reasons to try to get drugs through the FDA. But I think we would have a lot more happy people and a lot more successful relationships if people were assisted with MDMA to talk to each other and to acknowledge and listen better.
If this is in fact something that can help a lot of people, and we're at this stage of the research, which is, at least 20 years behind where it would be if it had been guided only by science and not by politics and fears and other forces, that's really actually a travesty.
So there's a growing consensus among scientists that drug laws and prohibition around psychedelic drugs is irrational, it's unhelpful.
Maybe it'll be like the 40 years in the desert. At the end of the 40 years, maybe I'll finally have the opportunity to become a legal psychedelic therapist.
In the promised land.
In the promised land, and in the glorious future where psychedelics are integrated and people are balanced and we're not so scared of people different than us, and people have shifted from fundamentalism to sort of direct spirituality, and people look at the drug war as one of the worst policies in the history of America, and we think, now let's party. I shouldn't say that part of it.
Well,
The Vaults of Erowid discuss a psychedelic experience in a frequently asked questions section that provides a partial overview of ideas expressed in Timothy Leary's book, The Psychedelic Experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They classified 5 levels of the psychedelic experience. Level 1. This level produces a mild stoning effect with some visual enhancements like bright colors, some short-term memory anomalies, left and right brain communication changes, causing music to sound wider. Can be achieved with moderate doses of cannabis, low doses of psilocybin, and moderate doses of certain entactogens like MDMA. Level 2. Bright colors and visuals. For example, things start to move and breathe. Some two-dimensional patterns become apparent upon shutting one's eyes. Confused or reminiscent thoughts. Change of short-term memory, leading to continual distractive thought patterns. Vast increase in abstract thought becomes apparent as the natural brain filter is bypassed. Can be achieved with very high doses of cannabis, low to moderate doses of psilocybin, low to moderate doses of mescaline, normal doses of MDA, which has a much more psychedelic effect than MDMA, and normal doses of entactogenic psychedelics of the 2C family, such as 2CB and 2CT7. Level 3. Very obvious visuals. Everything looking curved and warped. Patterns and kaleidoscopes seen on walls, faces, etc. Some mild hallucinations such as rivers flowing in wood grains or mothers of pearl surfaces. Closed eye hallucinations become three-dimensional. There is some confusion of the senses. For example, seeing sounds as colors, time distortion, and moments of eternity. Body movement becomes difficult and disorienting. There is a heightened sense of awareness of one's own feeling and drive. People who reach level 3 usually report it as thought-provoking and life-changing. For some people who reach level 3, their ability to discern is somewhat thrown off. People who reach level 3 and higher are more likely to respond to suggestive stimuli. At such a level, it is recommended that there be a sitter to watch over the tripper just in case he or she would do something that would be a potential hazard. Can be achieved with moderate to high doses of psilocybin, high doses of mescaline, and normal doses of LSD. Level 4. This level is categorized by strong hallucinations, such as objects morphing into other objects. There are many subtypes of these hallucinations: Mandelbrot patterns, spirals, wave interference patterns, and so on. Another characteristic is the destruction or division of the ego. Things may start talking to you, or you find that you are feeling contradictory things simultaneously. Some loss of reality is prevalent. Time becomes meaningless. Out-of-body experiences and extrasensory perception type phenomena are common, as is a blending of the senses. Visuals containing imagery of the Hindu, Aztec, Mayan, Native American, Indian, and African cultures are quite common. Can be achieved with high doses of LSD and very high doses of psilocybin. Level 5. Among the classical psychedelics, only the tryptamines such as DMT and extremely high doses of psilocybin can induce level 5 experiences. However, some atypical psychedelics like Salvinorum A, found in Salvia divinorum, and ketamine can also induce level 5 experiences at high doses. Experiences include total loss of visual connection with reality, the sense of not being human or having a body. The loss of reality is so extreme that it becomes ineffable. People have reported seeing themselves in entirely different settings than their original setting, and many people experience the feeling of being in a simulated reality, often computer simulated. Religious phenomenon is reported at this level. Often mentioned is a connection to the all-knowing presence or a universal knowledge, which many equate with extraterrestrials, artificial intelligence, God, love, or enlightenment. Users commonly report 1. Being clearly thrust into outer space at extreme speed. 2. Being thrust into an expansive void-like alternate dimension consisting of bright, colorful, fast-moving kaleidoscope environments, dynamic pulsing color beams, as well as complex three-dimensional geometric, mathematical, and linguistic patterns made of light. 3. Continually traveling at great speeds while watching patterns fly by morph, open, and reveal more complex patterns within. 4, encountering different types of living beings and superintelligent bodiless entities at the same time as 1, 2, and 3. These reports include contact with 3 floating entities made of light resembling giant spheres, humanoids, multiple types of unrecognizable insects, human-sized praying mantises, elves, cephalopods, complex robotic machines, and plants. 5. Intelligent beings attempting to communicate with users via visual linguistics, mathematics, morphing colored diamonds of different textures, flesh, gold, liquid metal, colored light. People report beings and entities manipulating what they can see and view, propelling them in different directions at disorienting speeds, and forcing them to view both macro and microscopic scale objects. Objects include planetary systems, galaxies, quasars, natural environments, space habitats, technological utopias, neurons, DNA, mitochondria, trilobites, cephalopods, bryozoa, and artificial self-replicating machines. Most users report similar auditory pattern of a combined high-frequency whine and a slow, deep-throbbing tone similar to a heartbeat. Most DMT users report feeling frequently uninhibited, clear-headed while experiencing peak effects and able to maintain the ability to think and reason in the above circumstances.